please take me to the hospital. And he ended up being out of work for 10 days. When he returned to work, during that time, the doctor, which was sort of amazing because this doesn't always happen, but the doctor reported the incident to the county ag commissioner's office. And so the county ag commissioner began an investigation. And so biologists went to the work site and started interviewing everybody. So it was very easily tied to my client, the fact that somebody had complained and it must have been my client. So when he got back after 10 days, he was removed from his crew that he had been working with for about 4 years and sent off to work on his own in an organic field. And they didn't provide him with any toilets. He said he had to walk like a half an hour in order to get to a toilet. They didn't provide him any water. And everybody sort of shunned him. And at the end of the day, he just couldn't tolerate that environment anymore, and he quit. And what we call that in sort of legal jargon is that that's a constructive discharge. It means that, you know, had it not been for the bad, insufferable conditions, my client wouldn't have quit. But a lot of times, people are forced to quit because the conditions are so bad. And so we're able to bring a cause of action for something like that and put a value on it. So another kind of category of cases, in fact, probably the largest category of my cases, has to do with sexual harassment. And unfortunately, I've had a very high number of sexual harassment cases that involve the most egregious form of sexual harassment, and that is rape and sexual assault in the fields. When these women come to me, when they finally get the courage, what often happens is that they don't come to me right away when something like that has happened, because they have to keep working. They have to keep working to feed their children. They have to keep working to pay rent. They have to keep working to put gas in their cars. And they have to keep working. Oftentimes they're supporting family in other places. And a lot of times my clients are the head of the household. So they're single moms, and they're just working, they're just basically like living paycheck to paycheck. And they cannot afford, they have no cushion to just stop working for a week. They need every bit of money that they earn. So in one of my cases, most recently, my client was working for as a raspberry picker. And she had been working for this company for since 2004, and she was really happy at her job. I mean, she didn't make a lot of money, but she liked what she did, and it was. Remember, she told when she testified, because the case ended up going to arbitration. She's like, well. It's easier than the lettuce, you know. So before, and she also, raspberry work is seasonal. So in the wintertime, she would have to go find work in the lettuce in Arizona, in Yuma. So raspberry picking was considered by her to be a better type of agricultural job. And so one season, she started to be harassed by a worker who he wasn't her supervisor. He was a coworker, and started coming up to her, started, kind of blocking her, impeding her access in the rows, inviting her out, sticking his phone number in her bucket, picking raspberries and putting it in her bucket. And she just kept saying, like, I'm not interested, go away. And finally, she becomes so nervous that she gets up the courage. And meanwhile, her husband, her estranged husband, is working nearby. Her son is working. She has children working there, and she's trying to protect everybody. And she's trying to protect herself, protect her family. She doesn't want her son getting upset and perhaps losing his temper and getting fired. And nobody, what I hear over and over again from my clients, nobody wants to be a troublemaker. They don't want to be that person. So she went to her foreman and she says, hey, this guy is bothering me. Okay, and that, women, my clients, do not go up to their bosses and say, hey, I think I'm being sexually harassed, and here's why. They say things like, this person is making me very uncomfortable, he's bothering me, I don't know why, he has no reason to be around me, I don't know why he's here. And all those are all those kind of statements should raise red flags to somebody to whom she's supposed to report these type of incidents to. They should raise red flags like, hey, this sounds like harassment. I need to look into this deeper. I need to take notes. I need to report this incident to the Human Resources Department. But somebody, a foreman, with very limited education himself or herself, isn't going to recognize that as sexual harassment unless the company invests money in his training. And employers have a duty to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace, and they have a duty to provide a workplace free of harassment. And so part and parcel of that duty is making sure that their supervisors are trained every 2 years, and when they hire a supervisor, that supervisor needs to be trained within 6 months of hire, and then thereafter every 2 years. And what happens is that employers also provide some training to the workforce, but what the training usually consists of is like a 5-minute, really brief little scenario like, hey, we have this law, the sexual harassment law. If you believe you're harassed, tell your supervisor. And then they go on into, a long list of, if you're injured at work, you better report immediately or you're going to be fired. And make sure to wear, your personal protective gear. And it's just like this massive information that comes at people, and very little is spent on the topic of sexual harassment, how to report it, to whom they should report it, and there are very few options. So going back to this one client, this raspberry picker, what happened was that she did report it to her foreman, as she should have, and the next year, they made him her boss. They made him her foreman, and there was no record that he had ever sexually harassed her in the previous year, and he ended up sexually assaulting her. He sent her to a row that had very few strawberries. It was very far away from the other rows. The rows were very dense, so you couldn't even see. They were so overgrown that you couldn't see to the end of the row. And so when she finally was able to get away from him and run into an area that was more public, she called her her foreman, the supervisor, the assistant ranch manager, and she tells him what happened. Then he says, hold on, I got to call my supervisor. The ranch manager comes, another man. This person makes her tell her entire story all over again. She's got blood on her pants. Her button is ripped off. And they said, well, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to find the person that you said did this to you. And if he disputes it, then I'm going to bring you two in a room together and we're going to all talk it out. And I don't know if anybody is as horrified as I am upon hearing that, but my mouth, I was just, it enraged me because these people had not been trained properly in how to deal with somebody that not only had just been harassed, but assaulted. So my client had to tell her story several more times. The employer was really kind of concerned with their image, and she really had wanted to go to the police, but she was very deferential. They took this sort of culturally sort of deferential attitude that she had toward her supervisors as this sort of, that she was okay with what was going on and the process that they were forcing her to partake in.